in the words of British Prime Minister Winston Churchill, is the worst disaster and largest capitulation in British history.
Percival's final telegram was sent on 15th February, and its simplicity was stark. It read, owing to losses from enemy action, water, petrol, food, and ammunition practically finished, unable therefore to continue the fight any longer. The British capitulation was both shocking and humiliating. They had lost to an enemy deemed incompetent in battle, and given up what was billed as the Empire's greatest fortress in the East. Percival walked with drooping shoulders to the Ford factory at Bukatima, the image of a broken man. The white flag and Union Jack were as limp as the men who carried them into the forward boardroom. Yamashita kept Percival waiting for an hour, but once the steely-eyed Japanese general sat at the table, he made his intention clear. He demanded an immediate, unconditional surrender. Percival asked to delay a decision till the following morning, but the request was met by unflinching eyes. Yamashita flatly refused. Yes or no were only words he wanted to hear. With a meek yes, the Gibraltar of the East was now in Japanese hands. 16,000 British, 14,000 Australian, and 32,000 Indian soldiers would start a journey of pain and suffering in several POW camps, including Fort Siloso. And that journey started with a 36-hour march through the center of Singapore to captivity in Changi Prison. The Japanese renamed Singapore Shunanto, meaning light of the south. Its inhabitants will plunge into darkness.
Sister. Sino ka picture natin? Okay. Okay, ate. Mamin Senpai. Okay.
With the suicide of Adolf Hitler and the unconditional surrender of Nazi Germany following the war in Europe had come to an end. Europe was in celebration mood, but the German surrender meant that Allied powers could focus all their attention on the Pacific region. But Japan proved to be a stubborn enemy. The Allies reclaimed one Japanese island after another, then firebombed Tokyo. But Japan would not yield. They stood firm, even as Russia made its move and invaded Manchuria.
Tago, tago. Magtago na. Hide, hide, hide.
On August the 6th, 1945, the United States unleashed the atomic bomb. It was the first ever nuclear attack on any country. The B-29 Superfortress Enola Gay flew over Hiroshima and released a bomb. The city was destroyed. Estimated 80,000 killed instantly.
When Japan still refused to bow, the Americans unleashed a second atomic bomb, named Fat Man, on Nagasaki on August 9th. In a flash, another 70,000 perished. This time, Japan's Emperor Hirohito ordered his government to end the war. In a radio broadcast on August 15th, the Emperor announced Japan's surrender to the Allies. 3 days later in Singapore, 300 Japanese officers and a platoon of soldiers committed harakiri. They could not accept defeat, but most of the Japanese occupying force resigned to their fate. The war in the Asia-Pacific had come to a close. On September 2nd, Japan formally surrendered to the Supreme Commander for the Allied Powers, General Douglas MacArthur, on board the USS Missouri in Tokyo Bay. On September 4th, 1945, General Sashiro Itagaki, commander of the Japanese 7th Area Army in Malaya, and Vice Admiral Shigeru Fukudome of the 1st Southern Expeditionary Fleet were summoned to the HMS Sussex in the Singapore harbor. They were ordered by British Admiral Cedric Holland and Generals Robert Manser and Philip Christensen to surrender their troops in Southeast Asia.
Oh, you're born already? Yeah, I'm born already. 4 years old. Oh, open already now. Morning people. Oh, parang totoo ah. Looks like.
Oh, we're going to surrender now. Japanese surrender.
It was September 12, 1945, and there was joy in the air at the Municipal Hall in Singapore. The bands of the East Indies fleet played Rule Britannia as the artillery guns fired a salute. General Itagaki led Vice Admiral Fukudome and 5 other Japanese officers to the surrender ceremony. Escorted by guards, they were cheered by crowds who came to witness the end of Japanese rule. Itagaki was representing Field Marshal Hisaichi Terauchi, Supreme Commander of the Imperial Japanese Forces in the southern region, who was taken ill in Vietnam. 3.5 years of Japanese brutal torture and executions were coming to an end. After taking their seats, Lord Louis Mountbatten, Supreme Allied Commander of Southeast Asia, sternly said that this was a non-negotiated surrender. It will be unconditional. The Japanese will submit to the superior force that is now massed here in Singapore. As his officers sat in silence, General Itagaki signed the instrument of surrender on behalf of the Japanese Expeditionary Forces in Southeast Asia. He penned 11 copies of the document, one for each of the Allied countries that participated in the war. After dismissing them, Lord Mountbatten walked to the steps of the municipal building and spoke to the crowd at the tunnel. I accepted this surrender on behalf of all of you, he said. And Southeast Asia was in British hands again. The Japanese invaders were beaten and their brutal reign finally ended. A free Singapore was jubilant, and peace had once again returned to the island, the region, and the world. Where would Singapore go from here?